and welcome to Volume 10 Knife Sheath School here at Victor George Leather Goods YouTube. So today we're going to take you through the complete process as always from designing a pattern for these pouch sheaths for a buck 110. There's some unique features involved with this pattern that I'm going to show you during the process, and I think that it's going to be a lot of fun for you. They're very simple to make. You don't actually even need the knife to make the pattern, and with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. And as always, everything is easy once you know how. All right, let's get to it. Let's start the patterning process for this rugged buck 110 pouch sheath. It has a few unique features which I'll demonstrate here in just a moment. But anyway, this classic buck 110, a true piece of American history, really deserves a quality sheath. So let's go ahead and get started, and let's look at this real quick. So this fold over area here on the pouch sheath that we're going to design into it gives the throat a little larger area for this insertion, and then the compression of the sheath itself will hold it in place. Of course, the flap is not only protective but decorative as well. Let's go ahead and get started. This is what our completed pattern will look like. It's very simple, and I'm going to demonstrate now how to do it. Remember, you don't need the knife for this pattern. So let's take an 8.5 inch by 11 piece of cardstock, and we're going to need a few rulers. I have these graph rulers that I use of various sizes, and then a circular template. You have to have a 2 1/4 inch circle on that. Of course, you can use a compass if you want to, but this is what I use. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a ruler, and somewhere near the middle, it doesn't have to be measured, draw yourself a line. And then scooch over 1/4 inch, draw yourself a second line. 1/4 inch. All right, so now we're going to take, this is the longest part of this whole pattern. From each line, we're going to go out 2 1/4 inches. So take your ruler and go 2 1/4 inches from that line. Draw yourself a line there, and 2 1/4 inches from this other line, also 2 1/4 inches. Replicate that on the bottom. And then from this other line, again, 2 1/4 inches. Give yourself a reference line and connect those. Make sure all your grid lines are true on the pattern paper. This will translate well into a quality sheath. Connect those lines. All right, that is the grid pattern for this particular project. Now, take this template or your compass and give yourself an arc here at the bottom, about 1/4 inch or so from the very bottom. I just use the template, which already has about that distance on the bottom. And we're going to line everything true with the paper. Get as close as we can to our lines and draw yourself a half circle. All right, so we have that. And now take your ruler and go up 4 1/8 inches from the bottom of this. So 4 1/8. Draw you a line there for the top of the sheath. And then just run a reference line all the way across. Like that. From this line up, we're going to go 5 1/4 inches for the top of the sheath. And we use that same 2 1/4 inch Oh, we gotta measure that 5 1/4 first. So put your little mark there at 5 1/4. Take your circular template, match the line up there, match your edges. Make sure everything's as true as you can get it. And give yourself a half circle up here. All right, that is pretty close to the end. Now for our fold over area here, all I do is I take a 1/4 inch punch and I'll go about halfway. Again, there's no real measurement, but I would go about halfway, and then I'm just gonna punch myself a hole for the turn back area. Once I have that, since we're not going to use the knife in this pattern, of course, if you have it, it makes it easier at the end to find your stud and snap locations. But in order to do that, I just go from this line here and I go 5/8 of an inch down and centered. So let's take this and go. Let's see here. I can see it better on this one. So 5/8 of an inch down, somewhere in the center there. Then of course, take your self-centering ruler, put the 0 mark on that dot, get your center measured, and then I just take a pointy awl and run it through there. So I was pretty close on my guess. That is going to be the location for your stud and post. And then for the flap location is 1 3/8 inch from the top. You could probably do this smarter than I'm doing it, but I never claimed to be smart. So again, 1 3/8 of an inch, and use your self-centering. Put it on that dot, find the center of the pattern, or of that flap. And then take your, and then this is the location of the socket. That is all there is to it for this sheath patterning, believe it or not. So follow these measurements and then you'll have a perfect fit. Once we do the stitch lines on the fabrication, I'll show you all of that. Caught myself, little detail I forgot to put. So I take a little washer and from the full flap to the face of the sheath, just take a little washer like this and give yourself a nice little rounded transition here. That's the only thing I forgot. So now this is your pattern. We're gonna cut it out. I went ahead and did another one and sort of colored it in so that you could see what the actual pattern is that we're gonna cut out. And then just follow these lines to cut out your pattern, split that ink line, and that's pretty much it. Once you cut it out, that's what you'll have. So now we will transfer this to leather and get started on the fabrication. Took our pattern and we transferred it to leather. In this case, I'm using a nice and firm 8-9 ounce veg tan. I want this sheath to be really rugged and stout. So cut out your pattern, take a salon board, sandpaper, and like I always say, just clean up your edges, make sure that they're nice and clean. You'll notice the split ink line on the cut here, that's gonna be edged away. So once you do that, then take your body, get a piece of welt leather. Now the welt isn't necessarily important other than for rigidity of the knife pouch. Gives it a little bit of strength. And in this case, the weight of the welt can be anything actually. You can have a 7/8, 8/9, 9/10. The thinner the welt, the more compression you're gonna have in the sheath. I think I used an 8/9 on this one and it gives me a good fit. All right, so take that into consideration. Take your body, place it on the welt leather of your choice, and trace it out as such. Go ahead and give yourself a 3/8 inch welt line and cut out a 5" by 1 1/4 inch belt strap. Okay, and once you have all those done, you'll also need, for the protective snap, I use a 7/8 inch washer that has a center hole so that I know where the hole is. Cut it out. You can also use this or a punch, obviously. I find that 7/8 of an inch works perfect for the post in the back. Gives it plenty of room. Gives it plenty of room on the back to allow for the stitching. And those are your pieces. And this is about 5/6 ounce, this piece right here. All right, so let's go do all the preparatory steps we need to. So we did some preliminary steps here, and I'm going to talk about those real quick, again, assuming that you have some basic leathercraft skills, and trying to shorten up these videos a little bit. So the first thing we did is on the back strap. I went ahead and took the size belt stock that I want to use, and I folded it around to the bottom. I established my stitch holes, top and bottom, and I went ahead and skived from the grain side the very end like that, so that there's no bump once the belt goes through. Went ahead and edged all around here from this point to this edge, top and bottom. Sand, burnish, dye, do whatever you want to do. I'm leaving it raw for speed of the video. Okay, so do all those steps. I also took the 3/8 inch welt and I split it in half, which I believe is 3/16, and established my stitch line. Now, don't go all the way close to the top on the stitch line. Leave it down just a hair, and you'll see why that's important in a minute. So I did that. Everything's prepped. I established my holes. I went ahead and punched my hole on the full flap. Obviously, if you're going to carve it first, do that. In this particular case, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to put a cap and post in there, or I'm sorry, a socket and post, and then I'm going to cover it with this little patch, and we'll see how that plays out. Just something to add a little rigidity and hide the snap. Sometimes I look at it, I like the snap there. Other times I look at it and it's distracting. So in this case, I'm going to put a little patch on there, and we'll see how that develops. All right, I went ahead and cut out my welt. I cut the corner of the welt at a 45 degrees. I leave a little excess all the way around the welt. Makes it easier to set when we do the gluing. I set my stud and post in my little piece, which now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and glue on the back strap. I'll probably put it somewhere even so that the fold over is somewhere around the top of the sheath. Again, we're looking for balance once that sheath is done. So I'm thinking that with the weight of the knife, that will be a good location there. Okay, and then I'm going to glue this piece. I'm going to use that hole that is center. I'm going to look through the stud to find that hole, and I'm going to mark my holes and glue and sew that on. So when we come back, we're going to have the belt loop and the stud snap sewn up. Let's do a little review here of what we've done so far. So we went ahead and sewed the belt loop on. It's in a good position. We sewed the stud protective piece of leather so it doesn't contact inside, and we sewed the patch on that covers the socket post. Let me show you though a couple of things about this that makes life a little bit easier. And again, this particular project is not necessarily production friendly, but if you want a really good quality sheath, then by all means, do this yourself. So on the piece here, what I did first of all is I punched my hole based on the measurements that we had, and I use this, it's called a universal eyelet setter. It's available at Springfield Leather, and it's got a little point there, but I use it a lot for recessing holes. And so what we're going to do is, once we recess that hole a little bit, we're going to take our post, not a cap, and we're going to place it in there. And what that recess does is it allows that tapered flange at the bottom to rest completely flush on the surface. We don't want that little bit of a bump. So now once we have that, then all we have to do is set our socket. And I'll do that real quick. And I always turn my setter a little bit while I'm setting that. Turn that until you can't turn that, socket. So if you look at that, there's no split in the peen. Everything's good and firm. And now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to cover that with the patch. So I take a block of wood that has some various size holes in there, and then because that socket could be in the way, we're just going to lay it right there, and that allows everything to be flat, and we can turn it and manipulate it. So I have my patch, and in this particular case, I didn't do it with this one, but I want to show you because it really does add a lot to it. So you take your patch, you cut it out to the appropriate size that you want. It could be an oval, it could be round, it could be anything you want. And then after that, I take those sheets of foam. They're like 1/16 inch thick. You can get them at the craft stores. They come in sheets. And then I just cut a piece small enough to fit inside the stitch holes. And you, of course, glue that on there. And when you get ready to mount this onto your flap, all you're going to do is place this on there, glue it down, and sew it. And I know you can't tell the dimensions of that angle, but it gives it a nice little swell in the middle, and just looks a lot more attractive than something flat. It's an option that really adds a nice look to your patch. Okay, so I wanted to show you that. And now what we're going to do is we are ready now to glue and sew our welt piece on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this area here and the corresponding area here for the glue line of the welt. Now, because that has a stud there, here's another good place for this block. So you can lay the stud into that little hole and do your wing divider here for your glue line. And anytime you're in a bind and you're trying to manipulate something like that, just find the little hole in your block and you are good to go. All right, so I'm going to glue the welt piece on to the front face, and it's nothing more. Because you have that excess, you'll be able to trim it flushly. So I just set it there and there, and once that's glued, then I will either diamond all my holes, Dremel drill press my holes, or use your stitching irons for that purpose. Let's go ahead and do that, and we are 90% done. We went ahead and glued the welt on, and what you're trying to do is getting this top piece as close to that hole or as close to the top of that as you can. And then once that's glued on, I always have a little bit of excess here at the top so that I can cut it flush. Now it's nothing more than taking whatever knife you want, going right up against the edge of that sheath, and take a few passes. And then we have that. Now, on the round end, it's nothing more than keeping that tool perfectly 90 degrees along the edge. And cutting out your round bottom. Okay, so now this little excess piece here, you can use, you know, your round knife. I have a bunch of these old spatulas, the high carbon steel, and I razor the edges. And then the nice thing about this is I can put it flush against there, push it straight down, and I get a perfectly 90-degree smooth top. Seems like whenever I try to use my utility knife, I get a little bit of an angle in there. Okay, now it's nothing more than moistening the fold area here and bringing it to that edge. And once you get that edge there, I'll show you a little something here just to give yourself an indicator. And that's why you have that excess piece there, because that'll be trimmed flush nicely. That gives you a good idea of where you need to draw your glue line. And of course, once you get this into that position, you'll want to mark a little bit of a mark there where your top is. And now it's nothing more than, and there's going to be a little bit of stress here, so I always double contact cement these areas here. So once you get 2 coats of contact cement, you've let them set up, and then press these 2 together, and then I'll show you, if you're going to use a drill press, a little handy tool to help you keep the stitches in line. Okay, everything's all set. We are close. We went ahead and glued the front face to the back flap piece, and it has been clamped for, you know, a good 10 minutes or so. Let that glue set up. And now I'm going to take this over to my drill press and drill out the holes. Of course, you can diamond point all those however you want, but it is a little bit thick, and a drill press will come in handy. A block of wood with a piece cut out in the middle allows the belt loop to lay flat, or the sheath to lay flat, and then you can drill out your holes at a perfect 90-degree angle. And I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then sew this, and then we'll be back to see if all of this worked, and we're going to place the knife in there. We have stitched the sheath together, and if you'll notice, the stitch line is pulled snug and straight, and for a drill press sewing job, I think it's pretty nice. All right, so don't hesitate using that method. Now, we still haven't put the knife in there. What we're going to do is we're going to trim off the bottom off camera, and we're going to take it to the flap wheel sander starting with 60 grit, and we're going to clean that edge up until it's about 220 by flap wheel, and then we're going to hand sand, and we'll be back to do the final reveal. See if that knife fits. All right, I know it will. So anyway, we're going to do that, and then we'll come back. All right, we are at the stage where we are going to insert the knife. I've went ahead and moistened the flesh side of the flap. I finished my edging. It could probably go to a couple more hundred of grit, but anyway, for the video build, it's good enough. I went ahead and took my wing dividers and then just took and bordered the stitch line. It's a very simple, inexpensive way of dressing up your knife sheath until you can get better tools and more experience. But something as simple as that really dresses up your stitch line. All right, let's go ahead and do it. So we made this for a right hand draw, and based on the measurements, we're going to squeeze it a little bit and we're going to force it in there. Okay, there's no wet molding here. That's a nice fit. And the turn back here on the sheath allows the wiggle room that you need, because if you were to bring that stitch line straight up here, if you didn't add this little feature, then that sheath would be too tight. I don't think you can get your knife in. But anyway, this particular design is made for that very reason. All right, now we're going to take our flap, and again, it's been moistened, and we're going to stretch it. And if you'll notice, that knife is in perfect position. Take your flap and cup it. Just sort of cup it a little bit. Place it onto the sheath, or I'm sorry, snap it in place. And now we're just going to let that dry. And we have our Buck 110, absolutely beautiful, solid, rugged sheaths. And another little thing here, this one here I dressed up quite a bit. I just used a red basket weave. I used a stitch line around the flap, which is nothing more than a decorative stitch line because there's no liner. And you know, you literally can do anything that you want. I'm putting a couple of pictures up on the screen of some of the other knives that I've made like this. But anyway, these are a lot of fun. They're very unique, and you can charge a little bit extra for this kind of work. And you're not going to get these anywhere else but from us makers. All right, in conclusion, I wanted to say a couple of things. Number one, these were so much fun to make, and I hope you get an opportunity to do one. Use these patterns. Fun little fact, back in the March-April issue of the Leather Crafters and Saddlers Journal, I provided an article on how these were made. I've had 26 years to improve the pattern, and I think that we are at the stage now where I'm super happy with them. So anyway, the important thing is, as I do this very quickly on the video to save time, it's important for you to take every single piece of this product that you are making, from the belt loop to the patch to the body to the flap, and really take your time and just work it until it's absolutely perfect. Take some time, do your edges, make everything clean, and when you get ready to put it together, it'll be an absolute work of art. So anyway, thanks. Continue to come by and check out these videos. I hope they're helpful for you. And as always, like, share, subscribe, do all those things that help the channel out. I do appreciate you, and thank you. Bye-bye.